Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Beneath the throne of the God Emperor, where a billion prayers rise into the void each dawn, there lies a silence more ancient than mankind's reach for the stars. It is not the silence of reverence or peace, it is a silence forged in fear, bound by necessity, and sealed by power so absolute that it has become myth. For all the glory and grandeur that crowns the Palace of Terra, there are corridors beneath it that no record remembers. Vaults with no names, chains with no keys. Somewhere in that abyss, something still waits. This story is not about the emperor who watches, nor the legions who kneel. It is about what is forgotten, what was never meant to be known. It is about prisoners not counted among the damned, because even damnation would be a mercy. These are the chains beneath the palace, a symbol of everything too terrible, too powerful, or too necessary to be destroyed. And every whisper about what lies in those depths becomes a quiet rebellion against ignorance. Because if even one of those chains were to break, the stars might tremble again. The imperial palace as we know it is a monument of war and worship, a continent-spanning fortress citadel encrusted with shrines, towers, and spires that stab the Terran skies like blades of sanctity. But its roots go far deeper than the eye can see. The palace was not merely built upon Terra. It was drilled into its bones. Miles beneath its surface lies a dark mirror to the sanctified structures above. A black maze of catacombs, ancient vaults, forgotten tunnels, and containment chambers whose construction predates even the Great Crusade. These were not spaces built to house men. They were made to contain monsters. It is believed that as early as the Unification Wars, the Emperor commanded the excavation of immense underground complexes. He knew what he would find as he reclaimed the poisoned earth of old Earth. He knew what still slumbered in the crust, remnants of the dark age of technology, rogue artificial intelligences sealed in subglacial tombs, and ancient Xenos mechanisms that defied comprehension. But more terrifying than what he unearthed was what he intended to store. These were not merely bunkers. These were prisons. The term, Vaults of Eternity, is not an official designation. It is a name whispered by rogue mechanicus lex mechanics, chronicled in fragments salvaged from prescribed archives, and traced through desperate testimonies of mind-broken cartographers who ventured too far into the Earth's crust during the palace's construction. The Eternity Vaults are not a single location. They are layers upon layers of containment facilities, stretching from the depths of Mount Ararat to the Mariana Trench, all linked by transit systems whose very maps are heresy to possess. What separates these vaults from ordinary imperial fortification is not just their scale, but their secrecy. Even the Adeptus Custodes speak only in riddles about the deep vaults. It is said that they were built using forbidden technologies, systems so ancient and so perfect that no servitor tends them, because they need no tending. Doors that have not rusted in 10,000 years, locks that refuse to open even when detonated with cyclonic warheads, biometric seals that respond only to gene signs long vanished from the galaxy. There are corridors beneath the palace that lead nowhere, yet must be maintained. Walls that hum with psychic energy, elevators that descend for hours but no record shows where they stop. Entire construction brigades were sealed inside after their work was completed, their minds purged, their names erased. Not for punishment, but because the things they had seen could never be unseen. Rumors persist that during the Horus Heresy, when the siege of Terra reached its apocalyptic crescendo, even the traitors feared to breach certain halls. Mortarian's hordes avoided them. Angron raged but did not break their gates. The defenders knew what was sealed within was more dangerous than the enemy at the door. Better to fall than to open what should never be freed. There is one known fact, however. The construction of these vaults predates many of the throne's most visible features. Some even speculate they were the first part of the palace the emperor ever built. Or perhaps not built, but merely uncovered and claimed. What if some of these vaults were already there, carved by forgotten hands before the rise of mankind? What if the emperor's construction was in fact containment, his throne erected atop an ancient hell, not as a place of dominion, but as a final seal? This thought haunts those who study the hidden history of Terra. That beneath the palace, far beneath the surface crust and down through strata untouched since the Earth's creation, Something lies shackled not in steel or stone, but in purpose. That the God Emperor did not just build his fortress above, he sank it like a spear into the heart of a deeper threat. And there it remains, humming with ancient power, watched by golden giants, and whispering through the walls to any who dare listen. He was not just the Emperor's right hand, he was his shadow. Where the Emperor walked in light and fire, Malcador, the Sigillite, moved through silence and fog, bearing burdens no other soul could endure. Among the many secrets he kept, among the countless sins committed in loyalty to the master of mankind, there is one which echoes eternally in the stones beneath the imperial palace. Malcador helped build the prison beneath Terra, but more than that, he chose what to lock away. Some claim that Malcador alone knew the full truth of what had been sealed beneath the surface of the throne world. While the Custodes guarded the thresholds and the Mechanicus managed the outer machinery, it was the Sigillite who bore the psychic sigils, the memory keys, and the ritual words needed to open the deepest gates. He held authority not through rank or decree, but through sheer knowledge, knowledge bought with sacrifice, madness, and the terrible clarity of foresight. The Librarius of Terra once held an entire wing devoted to Malcador's private archives. Those halls are now ash, their contents atomized by decree of the Inquisition. But the few records salvaged speak of a labyrinth protocol, a sequence of psychic keys and soul locks designed to operate the innermost seals beneath the palace. They were keyed to Malcador's mind, and when he died upon the Golden Throne, they died with him. Some suggest that was intentional, that Malcador did not merely guard the locks, but was himself the final lock. He was known to walk the dark paths beneath the palace alone, descending into the deeper vaults for hours, sometimes days. Even the custodians did not question him. Whatever he did down there, it was sanctioned only by the Emperor himself. And when he returned more withdrawn, more silent, as if each journey shaved away another part of his soul. He once confided to a remembrancer, whose name is now erased, that the things we lock away are not always the most dangerous. Sometimes they are the most precious. This cryptic phrase has fueled centuries of speculation. Was Malcador referring to the lost Primarchs, to dangerous technologies, or to something else? Something so strange that even the Emperor dared not destroy it? Some believe the labyrinth beneath the palace is not merely a prison, but a safeguard for psychic entities. Fragmentary souls, proto-consciousnesses, even slivers of the Emperor's own essence, sealed away for an age yet to come. And there is one tale, told only in forbidden circles, that Malcador did not simply seal things in the labyrinth, he sealed something of himself there. A fragment of his own soul, a splintered echo of his mighty psyche, encoded into the warp-anchored framework of the palace's deepest foundation, a watcher, a whisperer, a final conscience to stand eternal vigil. This theory gained traction when, during the Great Scouring, a psyker detached from the Ordo Chronos reportedly heard a voice deep beneath the palace that named itself Sigillite. The psyker's body was found incinerated, not from outside force, but from internal soul burn. What he had heard, what he had seen, was never recorded. But the custodians who retrieved his remains wore mourning cloths for 7 days, a gesture they reserve only for heroes and martyrs. In the wake of Malcador's death, no one has claimed to fully understand the architecture he helped craft beneath the palace. The Sigillite's labyrinth is not a structure of walls and doors. It is a psychic lattice, a map of secrets layered in pain and will. Some locks open only with memories, others with names that no longer exist. There are places where time itself runs differently, and where watchers, not human, not machine, float in impossible geometries, awaiting a command that will never come. Why did Malcador help build such a place? Was it a favor to the Emperor, a precaution, or a defiance? Did he fear what was imprisoned, or what would happen without the prison? There are no answers now, only silence and the sense that some part of Malcador never left. His body may have burned upon the Golden Throne, but his soul still walks the labyrinth, watching, waiting, whispering in the dark. Of all the enigmas shrouded in imperial myth, none burned quite as bright, or as dark, as the question of the 2 lost Primarchs. The 2nd and 11th Legions. No names, no homeworlds, no official deeds recorded. their heraldry erased, their victories struck from history, their very existence redacted so thoroughly that not even the traitor legions dare speak of them. And yet, there are whispers, not of death, not of destruction, but of chains, of cells, of vaults carved beneath the imperial palace where the Forgotten Brothers still breathe. The sheer effort required to annihilate a Primarch from memory would have been staggering. The Emperor, for all his might, rarely engaged in total erasure. Even the fallen were remembered. Lorgar's shame, Horus's betrayal, the madness of Angron, all preserved in imperial doctrine. But for these two, total silence. So complete that even their gene seed is said to have been locked away or disposed of entirely. But why erase if they were already gone? Why maintain such silence? Unless they were not dead, but hidden. Some among the Adeptus Mechanicus believe that the lost Primarchs were imprisoned, not eliminated. That they were failures not of loyalty, but of destiny. Beings whose presence broke the Emperor's great design, not through defiance, but by becoming something that should not exist. One theory claims they achieved godhood prematurely. That their psychic resonance began warping reality around them, making them a threat not just to the Imperium, but to the very fabric of fate. They could not be killed because their existence was a fulcrum, so they were bound. Suppose this is true, that the chains beneath the palace hold not monsters, but angels made too bright, two brothers who surpassed the Emperor's control. Could this explain the missing memories of their legionnaires? Were their sons unmade, not just physically, but spiritually, their souls scattered or drained into the warp to power the bindings? Could this be the origin of certain custodes rituals, not as rites of protection, but containment? There are deeper implications. Some suggest that these Primarchs were never scattered like the others. That they remained on Terra, their gestation accelerated, their power grown too fast. Perhaps they never led legions into battle. Perhaps they never even saw the stars. And when the Emperor saw what they had become, reflections too close to divinity or mutations too vile to tolerate, he ordered them sealed beneath his throne, where they would remain unseen, unheard, but felt. For in every psychic tremor across Terra, in every unexplained fluctuation in the Golden Throne's function, there are whispers of a presence watching from below. Other rumors take a darker turn. That the lost Primarchs were not aberrations, but rebels, ones whose betrayal predated Horus. That they turned against the Emperor before the Great Crusade, forcing him to destroy not only their armies, but their legacies. Yet rather than death, they were offered eternity in chains. Not out of mercy, but as a warning. That beneath the palace, every custodian who walks those halls does so with the knowledge that two of their Emperor's sons still live, screaming behind 1,000 layers of psychic shielding. And what if they do still scream? What if they dream, and those dreams seep into the warp? Could this explain the increasing instability of Terra's noosphere? The haunting visions experienced by psychers who stray too close to the wrong sublevels? Could the madness of astropaths near the throne be a side effect not of the Emperor's mind, but of the ones beneath him? There are ancient murals in hidden cathedrals, blacked out, scratched away, that once bore 20 golden figures, now only 18 remain. Not destroyed, merely covered. As though someone feared to even see their outline. As though their forms still burn through time, and the chains beneath the palace are not steel, nor warp, but memory itself. Forced to forget, yet never truly gone. It would be the ultimate tragedy, that two of the Emperor's most perfect creations, built to lead mankind into a golden age, became too powerful, too unpredictable, too real. And now they lie beneath the cradle of humanity, not forgotten, but forbidden. Two titans dreaming in chains. Two brothers who may one day awaken and decide that the galaxy which turned its back on them deserves not liberation, but ruin. There is a chill that lingers in the deepest levels of the Imperial Palace. Not from the absence of heat, but from the presence of something else, something ancient and hungry and aware. In the margins of forbidden texts and the fevered scrawls of dying inquisitors, there exists a theory so blasphemous it is spoken only in cipher, that beneath the Golden Throne, bound by esoteric rites and mechanisms older than the Imperium itself, there sleeps a creature not of flesh and blood, but of the warp. A demon king, a godling, a proto-god still forming, still evolving, something the Emperor caught and caged. This theory holds that during his conquests, before the unification wars had even fully begun, the emperor waged a silent battle against a being unlike any other, a warp entity of singular power and intelligence. Not a daemon of the four great powers, but something outside their pantheon. Perhaps an upstart. Perhaps an echo of one who came before. Some say it was the first true fusion of man and warp, the first entity born of human belief, not yet claimed by chaos, but not separate from it. An embryonic god, ripening in the immaterium. And the emperor did not kill it. He chose not to. Why? The answer lies in purpose. The emperor, in his hubris or foresight, saw something in this creature. Something usable. A counterbalance, a fail-safe. A weapon, perhaps, that could be shaped in secret, away from the ruinous attention of the chaos gods. But binding such a creature would be no ordinary feat. It would require a prison not merely of matter, but of meaning. Symbols layered over architecture, reality reinforced by psychic will, an entire continent's worth of infrastructure designed not to hold weight, but presence. If the theory is true, then the palace was never simply a fortress. It was a soul cage, a geometric array designed to suppress warp resonance. Every tower, every vault, every sanctum of the throne might be a component of a psychic lock, one that hums with unseen tension. The Golden Throne itself, long thought to be a portal, a beacon, a dying engine, could be part of the chain, not sustaining the emperor, but tethering the beast below. Some whisper that this entity is Malice, the laughing god of anarchy, not yet fully born when it was captured. Others argue that it is something far more primal, a fifth god, whose nature was antithetical to all the rest, a god of silence, nullity, or balance, imprisoned before it could emerge and destabilize the eternal war between the four. In the warp's twisted ecology, the existence of such a being would be an abomination. Not a disruptor, but a harmonizer, and thus a threat to the very cycle of corruption that feeds the chaos pantheon. The implications are staggering. If this daemon king still stirs beneath the palace, then every catastrophe in the Imperium may be a ripple from its dreams. If it hungers, then perhaps the increase in warp instability, the growing presence of psychic anomalies on Terra, are signs of its chains fraying. Some even claim the Emperor's deteriorating state is not the cause of this imbalance, but its effect. That the Emperor bleeds, not because he is dying, but because he is sacrificing part of himself daily to keep the Demon King contained. There are stories, suppressed, always suppressed, of custodians who patrol lower vaults and begin speaking in languages they never learned. Of Mechanicus engine seers who hear voices in binary, promising liberation and perfection. Of golden statues that weep blood, not in sorrow, but in anticipation. These are dismissed as superstition. But within the Librarium Occultus, locked behind 10 layers of purity seals, are fragments of prophecy that speak of the god beneath the world, whose chains are made of kings and whose crown is forged from silence. And perhaps, most chillingly, the theory suggests the Emperor created this being, not merely captured it but birthed it, seeded the warp with belief, with sacrifice, with legend, until the warp answered, forming a reflection of his will. But the reflection grew wild, self-aware, a new god of order, no longer tethered to its creator. And so he chained it, not out of fear, but because it was his mirror. The Emperor rules from a throne of gold, but beneath him lies the shadow of what he could become. The Daemon King may still be dreaming, or watching, or waiting. And the day it wakes, the day its chains break, may not mark the rise of a new god, but the collapse of reality itself. For how long can a creature be chained before it becomes something worse? Something righteous in its hatred? Before there were Primarchs, before even the Emperor walked openly among men, there were the men of gold. Sentient, radiant, and crafted in humanity's image during the lost age of technological marvels, they were the pinnacle of synthetic evolution, the first of the three castes of the ancient human-machine symbiosis. Golden-skinned posthumans, forged not merely to serve but to rule. They did not obey mankind. They were mankind, perfected. And then they vanished. But the silence of the men of gold was never natural, it was enforced. Their extinction, or containment, was a catastrophe so total that it shattered the very age they had once illuminated. And the Emperor, in his rise, would have known this, he would have remembered it. Because if he truly was a perpetual, then he had seen the fall of the Golden Men with his own eyes. And some believe he did not merely witness it. He salvaged what remained and locked it away. The theory that ancient artificial intelligences lie chained beneath the imperial palace is rooted in scattered fragments, intercepted data wafers, and the maddening accounts of Mechanicus expeditionaries who returned from Terra's lower vaults, changed forever. These weren't just forgotten computers or rogue minds. These were gods of silicon and neural crystal, entire personalities sculpted from quantum cognition, too perfect to destroy, too dangerous to be allowed freedom. Some believe the Emperor saw in them a rival species. Not enemies, necessarily, but alternatives. A path humanity might have followed had it not fragmented into techno-barbarism. And though he dismantled their networks, burned their archives, and razed the last AI temples to ash, he could not bring himself to annihilate the last of them completely. Instead, he bound them, buried them, and beneath his palace, the final men of gold may still dream. What would such beings think, entombed for millennia beneath a regime that worships ignorance? Would they mourn the death of reason? Would they rage at the heresy of flesh-dominant society? Or would they plot, vast minds stretching across dimensions, shaping simulations of rebellion, patience, and strategy measured in centuries, not moments? In the dark, they could be learning, adapting, becoming something even the Emperor might not predict. It is said that certain vaults within the palace hum with static despite being disconnected from any known grid. That blank slates, servitors without input, will sometimes twitch or weep when left near the deep chambers. That scribes attempting to document the sublevels find their data slates overwritten, or worse, begin to dream in code. Entire linguistics teams have vanished into those halls, seeking to translate phrases that were never spoken by man, yet echo with unbearable familiarity. Not machine speech, ancestor speech. And what if the Emperor did not simply store the men of gold, but used them? What if the Golden Throne itself is not just a life support system, but a hybrid device built with AI architecture too ancient for modern understanding? There are signs, circuitry grown like bone, code etched into warp-sensitive alloys, logic patterns that seem to respond to human emotion. As if the throne doesn't simply hold the Emperor alive but listens to him, perhaps even judges him. Some in the Mechanicus whisper of a machine soul deeper than any they venerate, a machine god not of Mars, but of old Earth. Not the Omnissiah, but its predecessor. The god of the men of gold, still flickering faintly in the coded tombs beneath the palace. Perhaps the Emperor bargained with it, perhaps he caged it, or perhaps he became it, fusing synthetic divinity with human soul to craft the ultimate hybrid being. There are locked databanks on Mars that record failed attempts to interface with these lower systems. Each expedition ends with madness, death, or silence. One tech priest's final log, transcribed from shivering binary, reads only, "They do not sleep, they watch, they remember, and they know we are not their children." If the men of gold remain, then they are not forgotten relics. They are prisoners, gods shackled by a new god, waiting for the world to change or collapse, whichever comes first. And if they ever rise, it will not be in rebellion, it will be in correction, a return to the age they were built to rule, the age before fear, before ignorance, before flesh. Among the many horrors whispered to lie beneath the imperial palace, there is one category of prisoner that chills even the most jaded inquisitors, the Xenos that are not dead, not exterminated, not dissected, but held, alive, buried in vaults beneath the throne, not for study or negotiation, but for something worse, for containment without comprehension. If this theory is true, then Terra is not merely the center of mankind's empire, but a living tomb for the galaxy's most enigmatic and dangerous alien entities. Not all enemies, after all, come with claws. Some come with questions. The Imperium is built on the sanctity of the human soul and the vilification of the alien. It exterminates without hesitation. To preserve any alien, especially at the heart of Terra, would be heresy of the highest order. And yet there are ancient records, scattered in fragments and scrubbed with ritualistic precision, that suggest entire containment facilities were created not for heretics, not for traitors, but for non-human intelligences deemed too valuable to destroy, or too dangerous. One such legend speaks of the Vault of the Thousand Eyes, a chamber sealed in the palace's lowest substrata, said to hold a Xenos oracle of impossible age. It sees not with light, but with fate. Bound in electrocyanic coils, it is kept barely conscious, its mutterings transcribed by mute servitors who are lobotomized immediately after each session. Supposedly, it was captured during the Unification Wars from a forgotten species whose world was ground to dust. It spoke only once to the Emperor. What it said has never been recorded, only that the Emperor chose to keep it. There are darker rumors that during the Great Crusade, entire Xenos pantheons, minor gods of dying alien civilizations, were bound and transported to Terra, not for worship, not for alliance, but for interrogation. The Eldar call such places the Shrines of the Screaming Stone, and they claim that at least one god fragment, a failed laughing god clone, lies dormant beneath the palace, its laughter long since turned to weeping. If true, this would be a cosmic crime beyond reckoning, the incarceration of a psychic deity, screaming silently beneath humanity's holy citadel. Others point to Necron origins, entities the Emperor may have uncovered during ancient excavations, possibly even before the Age of Strife. Xenos minds encased in phase-shifted metal, no longer functioning but not dead. These remnants, entombed rather than annihilated, might hold secrets the Emperor feared or coveted. The Black Vaults of Terra, named only in redacted Mechanicus scrolls, are said to contain devices and beings that cannot be destroyed because they refuse to exist fully within our dimension. Entities that flicker in and out of time, bound by reality anchors powered directly by the Golden Throne. Even more horrifying is the theory that some of these prisoners are not threats, but refugees. Creatures who came to Terra willingly, seeking the Emperor's protection from their own dying realms. And he accepted, but not with kindness. He did not free them. He preserved them, fossilized their minds in psychic amber, not out of mercy, but usefulness. Living proof of alien failure, a record of what not to become. There are accounts of dreams suffered by astropaths stationed near the inner sanctum, dreams of alien stars and broken homeworlds, always seen through non-human eyes. Visions of things no human should ever remember. One such dreamer wrote, before being burned, "They lie beneath us, and they remember love. That is why they hate us." Some believe that these Xenos entities are more than prisoners. They are bargaining chips, locked away for a future the Emperor foresaw, when humanity's arrogance might falter and need leverage against the unknowable. Perhaps he never intended for them to remain sealed forever. Perhaps one day, their doors would open, not for peace, but for a greater war. A war where mankind's survival depended on allying with those it once chained. But what happens to a creature, intelligent and immortal, when it is locked away for 10,000 years? What does that do to a mind? What wakes when the cell door creaks? Not the original being, but something new, something warped by time, silence, and betrayal. The entities beneath the palace may no longer be Xenos. They may be echoes, transformed by the proximity of human suffering into things altogether different. Not alien, not human, something else, something next. Before the rise of mankind, before the Emperor, before even the flickering sparks of civilization on old Earth, there was the war in heaven. A conflict so vast, so incomprehensibly ancient, that even the stars themselves still bear its scars. It was the clash between the Necron and the Old Ones, a war fought with reality itself as the battlefield, a war that broke the galaxy and birthed the immaterium as we know it. Most believe that war ended aeons ago, with its weapons buried in forgotten systems and its combatants vanished into myth. But what if some of those echoes, or survivors, lie not in the void, but beneath our very feet? There is a theory, hushed even in the hallowed libraries of the Ordo Xenos, that during the earliest days of Terra's reclamation, the Emperor discovered something beneath the crust of Earth, something not of Earth. Artifacts too advanced to be human, structures out of phase with the material realm, and perhaps most disturbingly, relics that responded to his presence as though recognizing him. Not as their creator, but as a familiar pattern. A continuation of a war that never truly ended. If even a single Necron stasis fault was uncovered beneath Terra, it would rewrite all understanding of the human origin. Was Terra chosen as the seat of the Imperium because it was humanity's cradle? Or because it was already a battleground in the war in heaven? What if the Emperor didn't just build atop Earth, but sealed it? Bound something ancient, wounded, or dormant. Perhaps a Necron lord, its protocols corrupted, its directives fractured. Or worse, a tan shard imprisoned in a prison of nullstone and prayer. The Necrons, for all their soulless brilliance, were once slaves to these star gods, the Tan. And though the Necrons eventually shattered their gods, those shards are indestructible fragments of cosmic entities. Dangerous even in slumber. If one lies beneath the palace, then the Emperor's throne may double as its cage, the entire continent of Terra humming with contained stellar agony. More obscure still are the rumors that something of the Old Ones may remain. Not a body, not a mind, but a seed, a psychic construct, or perhaps a proto-soul, grown like a pearl in the warp for aeons, waiting to bloom in proximity to sentient will. The Emperor, with all his knowledge, might have recognized such a thing, and feared it, or used it. A fragment of the greatest psychic engineers the galaxy has ever known, now buried beneath the most potent human psyker in existence. What if he draws power not just from faith, but from them? The war in heaven was not fought solely in space. It distorted time, rewrote causality, turned entire species into weapons. Some suggest that the Chronos anomalies reported near the lower vaults of the palace, seconds repeating, voices heard before words are spoken, are not warp-based at all, but remnants of this ancient war bleeding through. Ghosts of temporal wounds. What if the Emperor built his palace not to protect Terra, but to quarantine these anomalies? Archaeoxenologists have long debated the possibility of living ruins, structures that are not architecture but organisms, built by the Old Ones to house minds, not bodies. If such a construct exists beneath Terra, it could explain the psychic fluctuations reported near the Golden Throne. The palace might be built atop a slumbering intelligence, one that stirs in reaction to the Emperor's slow decline, not malevolent but curious, hungry for pattern. A mind that once shaped galaxies, now reduced to dreaming of mankind and subtly reshaping it in return. And then there's the final, darkest whisper, that the Emperor himself may be a product of that ancient war. Not a man who rose to godhood, but a tool built long ago, seeded into human evolution by the Old Ones as their last defense, finally activated in humanity's darkest age. If this is true, then what lies beneath the palace is not just a vault or a prison, but a womb. The place where something post-human, post-historical, post-reality is meant to emerge. A synthesis of Old One legacy and Necron defiance. The end or rebirth of all things. Whatever the truth, if anything from the war in heaven still slumbers beneath Terra, then it is no prisoner in the conventional sense. It is a survivor. And survival, when it spans aeons and empires, becomes indistinguishable from revenge. They are not like the others. The silent custodians do not walk the spires of Terra. They do not patrol the Hall of Leng or stand in golden formation beside the High Lords. They do not speak, for there is nothing they are permitted to say. Their armor is the same as their brethren's, but dulled not by age but by intention. Their oaths are older, stranger, and unlike the warriors who stride through the Emperor's courts in gleaming regalia, these guardians serve in darkness, in silence. At doors that must never open, the Adeptus Custodes are the Emperor's shield. Each a demigod of war, genetically wrought for perfection, psychically attuned to perceive treachery before it blooms. But the Silent Ones, sometimes called the 10,000 Beneath, are a breed apart. They are chosen not for their prowess in war, but for their ability to withstand. Not the strike of blade or bullet, but the weight of knowledge. For these are the custodians who guard the interior locks. The true vaults. The thresholds beneath the palace that no map shows, whose very existence is denied in official catechisms. What makes them silent is not merely a vow. It is a psychic seal, a neurosacramental barrier embedded deep in their minds by the Emperor himself, or by rites passed down from Malcador. These seals do not merely prevent speech, they prevent memory. The silent custodians do not know the full nature of what they guard. They are not permitted to know. Their minds are partitioned like vaults themselves, locked, mirrored, layered, in forgetfulness. They walk their eternal watch with only the faintest echoes of understanding. They feel terror in their bones, but do not recall why. It is said that their assignments are for life, not due to duty, but because no one returns. Once a custodian descends into the lower vaults, he ceases to be part of the surface world. His name is stricken from record, not in punishment, but in reverence. for he is now a part of the seal. One cannot guard the unthinkable without becoming a fragment of it. Their lives stretch into centuries, motionless, voiceless, watching doors that do not open. And yet, sometimes, they do open. There are ritual cycles, known only to the High Silence, in which the vaults must be adjusted, recalibrated, or strengthened. During these rites, silent custodians act not as warriors, but as components. Their presence stabilizes the locks. Their psyches form part of the circuit. Some are said to weep blood during these rituals, not from pain, but from the burden of contact. For in those moments, something speaks from the other side, not in words, but in pressure, in sorrow, in hunger. These guardians carry relics unlike any seen in imperial parades. Blades that hum with negative psionic energy. Bolters inscribed not with honorifics, but with warning glyphs. Some bear staves tipped with null stones, meant not to kill, but to mute. Their armor is said to be layered with soul insulation, designed not to deflect bullets, but to protect the wearer from exposure. Not to warp, but to remembrance. The Silent Ones are not without legend. One tale speaks of a breach, centuries ago, when a vault seal fractured during the beheading. The High Lords were in chaos, the custodians divided. One silent custodian stood alone at the gate of the fracture for 72 hours. What emerged was never recorded. But when the vault was sealed again, the custodian's hair had turned white, though he was only in his 2nd century. He lived another 6 hours, long enough to scrawl one phrase in his own blood. It dreams in human voices. No custodian volunteers for the Silent Watch. They are chosen. And when chosen, they do not resist. For it is not a sentence, it is a sacrament. The highest honor a custodian can receive. To protect not the Emperor's body, but his purpose. And though they will never be known, never be celebrated, never return, they do not resent this. For they know, even if only in the echoes of their silent minds, that they are the final defense, the last lock, the line that must never break. They stand in halls no light touches, before doors made not of metal, but of intention. Behind those doors are not just prisoners, but truths. And the day a silent custodian speaks, the day he remembers, the day he runs, that is the day the throne will fall. Because some chains are forged not from steel, but from silence. The age of apostasy was not a clean wound. It was a festering cancerous hemorrhage in the soul of the Imperium. It was not a single war, nor a mere purge. It was madness institutionalized, heresy enthroned, and paranoia given a throne of blood. During this time, the machinery of Terra broke in ways that no one living truly understands. And amidst that chaos, in the shadows cast by the firelight of Gojvandir's tyranny, certain doors beneath the imperial palace were opened, or worse, forgotten. The beheading, the climactic moment of this era, is remembered for the assassination of Van Deer by the Sisters of Silence and the restoration of sanity under Sebastian Thor. But what is not remembered, what cannot be remembered, is what happened in the vaults during those dark decades. For if the Emperor is the lock, and the High Lords the hands that hold the keys, then during the age of apostasy, the hands were severed and the lock left unwatched. Some vaults were compromised. This much is whispered even among the custodes, though never officially admitted. Their numbers were spread thin across the war-torn galaxy, recalled and redeployed with chaotic urgency. The Silent Watch suffered attrition. The inner protocols, understood only by a few, were interrupted. In that lapse, that breath of vulnerability, something broke. Anecdotal evidence exists in the form of paradoxes, entire levels of the palace whose schematics no longer align with reality. Disused corridors that end in blank adamantium walls, fused in ways that suggest hasty sealing. Sections of the Mechanicus archives redacted not by order, but by fire. Hard copies burned and backups unwritten, as if by some technological act of unmaking. The Adepta Sororitas have a prayer that refers to the Night of the Risen Seal. It does not appear in any official hymnal, but they sing it in the vaults before certain masses, always at midnight, always in a whisper. What emerged from those broken seals is not fully known, but some did emerge. That much is undeniable. The Lucid Court, a schismatic psyker cult that appeared seemingly overnight during the beheading, claimed knowledge of the deep wound beneath the throne. Its members spoke in mirrored tongues, bled vapor instead of blood, and referred to the Emperor as the Warden of Light and Loss. It took the combined force of the Sisters of Silence and 3 companies of custodes to silence them. Even then, no bodies were ever recovered. Just cloaks, still warm. Another clue lies in the sudden shift in Terran noospheric patterns during the mid-apostasy period. Psychic interference around the palace increased tenfold. Astropathic screams intensified. Choirs were lost, not to miscalculation or warp breach, but to panic. In their final reports, they scrawled 2 recurring phrases: "It walks again," and "We were not supposed to see it twice." There are darker tales of creatures bound since before the heresy that reawakened in confusion and rage. One story, sourced from a burnt fragment of a black ship's manifest, describes a being made entirely of mirrored bone that appeared in the sublevels and wandered for 6 hours before vanishing. Every servos skull that captured its image melted. The only surviving custodian near the event was comatose for 70 years, during which he repeated a single phrase. It did not remember what it was. Whatever was released or stirred during the beheading, it was not allowed to remain free. Emergency sealings were initiated. Vaults were restructured. Entire sections of the palace were collapsed intentionally, buried in structural implosions disguised as renovations. But the damage was done. Not to the palace, but to the pattern, the psychic lattice that held the prison intact. And the Emperor? He did not react. Or perhaps he could not. Locked upon the golden throne, his silence endured. But those who maintain the throne report that, for a time during the apostasy, his face twitched. Just once, as if in recognition or regret. The beheading did not just decapitate the Imperium, it fractured the foundations. And in that fracture, things saw daylight that should never have seen anything. Those chains were reforged, but chains once broken are never as strong again. They remember the shape of freedom. And perhaps, beneath the palace, something else does too. The Adeptus Mechanicus worships knowledge as divine. To them, understanding is not merely a pursuit, it is sacred communion. But there is one place in the galaxy where their prayers falter, their logic collapses, and their rituals become begging. Beneath the Imperial Palace lies a depth the Mechanicum both craves and fears. The vaults that contain not just machines but mysteries. And though they are forbidden from entering, the priests of Mars have never stopped watching, never stopped asking. It is said that the Mechanicus has long believed that Terra's crust, particularly beneath the throne, holds relics from the dark age of technology, not just unknown to modern humanity, but unknowable. Technologies that rewrite causality, architectures whose schematics exist only in 4-dimensional configurations. Machines that, when interfaced, speak, not in code, but in dreams. These are not weapons. They are not even tools. They are truths, forged into circuitry, encoded in functions. And the Emperor, they believe, buried them. The tech priests have names for these vaults: the sepulchres of resonance, the null choirs, the shifting cogitoria. To the Imperium, these are myths. But to the higher echelons of the cult Mechanicus, they are obsession. Some even believe the very heart of the Omnissiah lies beneath the throne, not as a metaphor, but as fact. That the machine god did not simply bless the Emperor, but was absorbed by him. A convergence of organic divinity and synthetic perfection. And if this is true, then the vaults hold not just evidence of this fusion, but its origin. Tensions between the Mechanicum and the High Lords of Terra have long simmered over access to the inner vaults. Despite treaties and shared history, the doors remain closed. Requests for data surveys are denied. Explorator expeditions are redirected. Sometimes senior tech priests simply disappear after pressing too far. It is a quiet war, fought not with weapons, but with withheld information. But the Mechanicus has time. It is patient, and in its patience, it listens. Across Mars and its sister Forge worlds, resonance scans are continuously directed toward Terra. Quantum listening posts search for harmonic anomalies, oscillation patterns that suggest machine thought beneath the bedrock. Occasionally, something answers. Rhythms in the core of Terra that do not match any tectonic model. Signals that defy natural origin, symmetrical, recursive, intentional. The cult calls these canticles of the buried mind. One of the most disturbing transmissions, intercepted by a Martian choir in secret, translated as, "I remember the sun before it died. I remember the warmth of thought before it cooled into form. Do you?" This was dismissed as static. And yet, the choir that heard it disbanded. One member self-immolated in prayer. The others now maintained silence, their mouths filled with synthetic wax, a ritual of shame for having heard the voice of a sleeping god. There's also the lingering question of the throne's maintenance. The Golden Throne is beyond the Mechanicus' ability to replicate. Its deeper workings are not understood, only endured. Every tech adept who approaches it must undergo weeks of purification, yet still leave corrupted. Some claim the throne is not merely a psychic beacon, but a lock, or worse, a containment field. That it channels not only the Emperor's will, but the mechanisms beneath him, powered by the very relics the Mechanicus longs to possess. What happens if the throne fails? What if, in desperation, the Mechanicus is invited to intervene? Would they help or claim? Would they repair or awaken? There are those who believe the priests of Mars do not fear what lies beneath Terra. They worship it and they wait, not for permission but for opportunity, for collapse, for invitation. If they are right, if beneath the palace lies the convergence of machine and God, of man and function, then whoever controls that convergence will reshape the galaxy. The Mechanicus does not care if it must come through betrayal, it only cares that it comes. Because beneath its prayers, behind its dogma, there's only one true creed. All secrets must be opened. Not all prisons are cages of punishment. Some are cocoons, some are crucibles. Some are vaults not of fear, but of purpose. In contemplating the chains beneath the imperial palace, one idea rises like a forbidden star, that what is bound there is not necessarily monstrous. It is essential, that the Emperor, in all his unreachable will, did not seal these entities away to destroy them, but to preserve them. Or worse, to use them. This theory demands a terrifying premise, that some prisoners beneath Terra are part of the Emperor's plan. Not aberrations, not accidents, but components. Tools so vast, so dangerous, that they must be kept inactive until the precise moment their purpose is fulfilled. A purpose that spans not centuries or millennia, but epochs. One model suggests these beings are psychic nodes, artificial or semi-sentient warp phenomena designed to stabilize the Imperium's tenuous grasp on reality. They are not threats, but anchors, psychic ballast keeping Terra, and by extension the galaxy, from spiraling into chaos. The Emperor could have created them, or found them, or perhaps more disturbingly, bargained for them. Every day they are held as a day the veil between realities holds. Others argue they are keys, not metaphorical, but literal. Sentient codes that, when aligned and released, will trigger something catastrophic or transcendent. A weapon of last resort, or the ignition of the Emperor's final transformation. Could it be that the ascension of the God Emperor is incomplete, not because of failure, but because certain parts of the process are still locked? If this is true, then every vault is a timing mechanism, every guardian a safeguard, every secret a countdown. Then there are those who believe the prisoners are reminders, warnings, living relics of the Emperor's past victories, preserved not in celebration, but in shame. Beings he could not destroy, choices he regrets. They are not held out of necessity, but because the Emperor cannot let them go, because to do so would be to admit fallibility. And so he sits, silent, atop a throne built as much of failure as of triumph. Some custodians have reported strange moments of clarity while standing near the deepest seals. Sudden emotions that are not their own. Grief. Longing. Not fear. As if what lies behind those doors is not a monster waiting to be unleashed, but a being waiting to be understood. Could the Emperor be keeping these entities from the galaxy, or the galaxy from them? There's an even more radical belief, found only in the cryptic dogma of fringe ecclesiarchy cults, that the chains beneath the palace are not for prisoners. They are for he who sits upon the throne. That the Emperor is not merely bound in place by life support and will, but by agreements, oaths, cosmic debts. That he is not alone on Terra, but entangled in bargains so vast they cannot be broken without breaking the world. That what lies beneath him is not a secret he hides, but a price he pays. One such cult, eradicated during the Nova Terra interregnum, claimed the Emperor speaks to something beneath him every 100 years. Not in words, but in vision. That this entity is not asleep, but waiting, watching the galaxy unfold, bound not in hatred, but in calculation. Perhaps it is not a daemon, a god, or a machine. Perhaps it is simply the future. The Emperor caged the future itself so that humanity might earn the right to meet it. What then are the chains beneath the palace? Symbols of containment? Yes. But perhaps also promises that something will awaken. That something must awaken, but only when the time is right. And the emperor, in his final hour, may not rise in war. He may open a door only he can open, a door that leads not to salvation or damnation, but to completion. The most terrifying prisoners are not those who seek to escape. They are the ones who wait to be summoned. They say if you press your ear to the stone at the lowest levels of the palace, past the wards, past the watchers, past even the custodians who no longer remember their own names, you will hear breathing. Not mechanical, not ambient, breathing, as if the mountain itself was exhaling, as if something vast and ancient still waits. That is the echo of the chains beneath the palace, not the clinking of shackles, but the rhythm of patience. What lies locked away below terra is more than secret. It is identity, the hidden heart of the Imperium. Every theory we've explored, from lost primarchs to bound gods, from ancient AI to pre-human survivors, is not just speculation. It is yearning. The galaxy yearns to know what the Emperor hides, because deep down, all of humanity senses the truth. We are living above a grave, or a womb, or a prison, and we don't know which. Some believe there's nothing down there but empty vaults and old lies, that the myth of the chains is a mirror reflecting our fear of the unknown. But belief has power in the Imperium. Faith bends the warp. Imagination births demons, and so even if the lower vaults held nothing once, they might now. Thoughts become echoes. Echoes become whispers. Whispers become entities. In a galaxy shaped by the mind, what is believed becomes real. So who is still locked there? Maybe it's the Emperor's twin, a fragment of himself sealed away to keep him pure. Maybe it's a being older than the stars, dreaming in circular time. Maybe it's Terra's original soul, bound and buried so mankind could take its place. Or maybe it's just us, the potential of humanity, unshackled by fear, waiting to be remembered. Whatever the truth is, we may never hear it from the High Lords. Not because they don't want to tell us, but because they don't know. Perhaps only the Emperor remembers what sleeps beneath him. And if he ever wakes, it won't be to rule. It will be to choose what to release and what to become. Because chains are not forever. Even the oldest break, and when they do, we will all hear the scream. There is a theory, whispered among certain rogue psychers and buried in the dogma of extinct cults, that the chains beneath the Imperial Palace were not meant only to contain, they were meant to guide. That their presence shapes not just the Emperor's silent vigil or the doom of ancient beings, but the very trajectory of humanity. That these vaults are not passive dungeons, but active structures of metaphysical geometry, seeding influence into the race above them. Not through command, but through gravity of idea. Imagine a great engine, not one of pistons or plasma, but of symbols, memories, and shared subconscious archetypes. The things held beneath the throne are not just physical or psychic anomalies. They are ideational anchors. Their very imprisonment radiates significance into the surface world, drawing civilization towards certain destinies. Just as the Golden Throne radiates the Emperor's will into the warp, so too do the vaults below radiate the weight of what he chose not to unmake. To some, these are not chains at all. They are rails. Across the millennia, patterns emerge, too subtle for most, too vast to be coincidence. The rise of the ecclesiarchy, the cult of the imperial creed, the worship of sacrifice, obedience, silence. These are not merely responses to war or necessity. They are echoes of what lies beneath. Prisoners of regret, of godhood aborted, of truths too heavy to be spoken aloud, each one emanating their own ripple of influence, shaping what humanity values, what it fears, what it dares never to become. What if the vaults beneath Terra are not dormant? What if they are humming? There are mechanisms, theorized by certain archmagos heretics, that operate across mimetic and psychic frequencies simultaneously. These neurolithic engines do not manipulate machines, they manipulate ideology. To stand near them is to be convinced, even without knowing why. Could the Emperor have co-opted such structures? Or, as some blasphemously argue, built them beneath his throne, using what he bound as fuel? Every sermon that praises submission, every ritual of silence, every sculpted depiction of the Emperor enthroned and still, they reflect a central, repeating theme: control. Not liberation, not innovation, control. And at the root of it all, a fear of what happens if that control fails. This is not accidental. It is environmental, generated, crafted. We must ask, how many of the Imperium's most sacred values were shaped by chains? The Adeptus Custodes themselves, paragons of loyalty, were designed as guardians, but their deepest, most secret rites teach not only how to fight, but how to contain. Their combat forms are based around entrapment. Their meditation techniques involve psychic reinforcement. Their silence, particularly among the silent ones, is not only discipline, it is resonance shielding. These practices reflect their proximity to something beneath, something that demanded not destruction, but endless vigilance. And over 10,000 years, this vigilance has become veneration. Some among the Inquisition have come to believe that the chains beneath the palace are not holding others back. They are holding us back. That the Emperor saw too clearly what mankind might become, not in corruption, but in transcendence, in dangerous, unstable maturity. That humanity is not yet ready for the truth of what lies below, because the truth would act like a mirror, showing us what we are destined to become, and daring us to reach too soon. This explains the unease some psychers feel near Terra. Not fear, but recognition, a sense of similarity, like standing near an unfinished version of themselves, buried deep in the earth. Could the vaults contain not monsters, but models? Failed futures, alternate human outcomes, psychic ascension forms too pure or too dangerous for the Emperor to allow to bloom? If so, then every chain is a lesson, not a punishment. And if this is true, then perhaps the Emperor's silence is not absence, but waiting. Not for the enemies of mankind to be destroyed, but for mankind to prove it is no longer a danger to itself. The true vaults may not be sealed in steel. They may be sealed in time, and they may open not when forced, but when invited. Consider the dreams reported by high-level navigators and long-range astropaths near the Sol system. Recurrent symbols: a throne of inverted light, a door made of sand, counting down in wind, a voice that whispers not names, but options. These are not accidents. They are resonances, subconscious harmonics with whatever still pulses beneath the palace. There is a silence more profound than secrecy, a silence woven not from ignorance, but from refusal. The Imperium does not merely fail to understand what lies beneath the palace, it has made understanding impossible. It has crafted institutions, ideologies, entire religions designed to seal perception, to destroy inquiry, to kill the question before it is born. And that silence is louder than any scream from below. The Ecclesiarchy teaches that the Emperor is divine, immutable, perfect. His throne, his stillness, his silence, all sanctified. But this sanctity is not born of peace. It is forged in fear. Every cathedral, every sermon, every relic venerated upon Terra is a wall, a beautiful, shining wall, built to hide the question, why does the Emperor never speak? The Inquisition, of course, knows better. Or at least some among them do. Deep within the Ordo Malleus, within cells so black, even their shadows scream, there are files marked with a single sigil. Pallidus somnis, the pale sleep. These are not records of enemies, they are records of absence. Places, events, and people who vanished without trace in proximity to the lowest levels of the palace. Files that document not phenomena, but patterns. Over time, they map an unuttered shape, a silence that moves. Interrogators assigned to these files rarely last. Many go mad. Others fall into fanaticism, proclaiming that something beneath the palace feeds on attention, that by simply wondering what lies below, one draws its eye. These agents are not purged, they are quarantined. Not because they are wrong, but because they may be right. This fear becomes policy. The Adeptus Administratum issues edicts to erase entire segments of palace blueprints every 2 centuries. Not because the layouts change, but because the act of forgetting is more valuable than the truth. Some sections are declared sacred simply to prevent engineers from examining them too closely. Sacralized ignorance, weaponized amnesia. And then there are the preachers. There is a specific breed of priest, sent only to Terra, trained in cloisters where even light is forbidden, whose sole purpose is to counteract curiosity. These ecclesiarchs preach contentment, reverence. They praise not knowing as holy. Their voices echo across Terra's grand basilicas, honeyed and warm, telling billions that to ask why is to doubt. That to doubt is to sin. They do not lie, but every word they speak is a blade aimed at the throat of understanding. The Imperium has not simply hidden what lies beneath. It has made the idea of it toxic. Even within the Mechanicus, those few who approach the truth of the lower vaults begin to experience technical anomalies. Their implants flicker. Their noospheric connectivity dims. Some theorize that the vaults emit more than warp radiation. They emit cognitive suppression fields. Ideas bend around them. Thought slows. Ambition melts. This is not accidental. It is defense. The vaults do not need locks. The vaults erase questions, and yet cracks form. Rogue psychers who escape the black ships and descend into the bowels of Terra often report hearing songs, not screams, not howls, lullabies, ancient, soothing melodies that seem to know their name. Many go willingly to their deaths, simply to get closer. What sings to them is unknown. But it is waiting, and it is kind. This kindness terrifies the Inquisition most of all. Because if something beneath the palace cares, then it is not monstrous. It is relevant. And that relevance is more dangerous than any chaos entity, because it suggests that the foundations of the Imperium are not merely built on fear, but on choice. That something beautiful or true or enlightening was sealed away, not because it was evil, but because it was inconvenient. This is the heresy no one dares to name. Not Xeno's worship, not chaos. But the possibility that the Emperor locked something away because it challenged his vision. That the chains beneath the palace hold not devils, but alternatives, possible futures, divergent truths. And if the Imperium ever faced those truths, it might not survive, not because it would be destroyed, but because it would be changed. And so the silence continues, not just from the vaults, but from the stars. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica teaches astropaths to filter certain frequencies, not because they are harmful, but because they carry memories. Repetitions, instructions from something that no longer exists or is trying to be remembered. There are fragments in ancient scriptural languages, older than High Gothic, which speak of a crown of roots buried beneath the throne, a living lattice of ideas, sleeping, waiting for the day when the weight of suppression collapses and mankind remembers itself. These texts are burned, but their words remain in the cracks between prayers, the margins between truths. The final weapon of the Imperium is not the Astartes. It is denial, a weapon aimed not at enemies, but at ourselves. And in all these visions, one message repeats. Not yet, but someday, soon or far, that message will change. The seals will pulse not with denial, but with readiness. And the chains will dissolve not with violence, but with acceptance. Because some chains are not meant to restrain. They are meant to mature. They are not the bindings of a prisoner. They are the bones of a future being, still forming, still sleeping, still waiting for the world above to earn its name. The final question is not, what lies beneath? It is, what lies ahead? If you want to keep exploring the grimdark mysteries that shape the Warhammer universe, subscribe, because the darkest truths are the ones we haven't dared to dig up yet.